character because we were playing like Xenoverse at the time. He's sketching his Xenoverse character, and I was like, "Yo, bro, that looks dope. You want to make a game?" And he's like, "Yeah." Literally, he was just like, "Yeah." My little brother, D, like, he's so nonchalant.
Love. I heard that game development sometimes ruins video games for people. Like if, gaming and game development is your job and you go home to play video games, it's like, oh, this just reminds me of work. Is it like that for you? Can you still play video games?
I wouldn't say it's exactly like that for me. I still love video games to the core. I love adventure games. I love fighting games. The thing about it is, like, lately, it's turned away from me playing games to me watching games, watching professionals and amateurs play video games and having fun to see how it's more of like a research tactic for me. It's like I'm seeing how they manage the mechanics in games, or I'm watching how what they see is fun, what they're exploiting, what they're not exploiting in the game, and figuring out functions of the game that developers didn't even intend to put in. That's what I've been watching and doing. So it still feels like fun to me because I know a lot of people in general just like watching podcasts, watching walkthroughs of games, and I do the same thing. But at the same time, it's me breaking down a lot of the stuff that I'm watching to get a better understanding of what people actually enjoy and what they don't.
Well, that is actually super exciting to hear. You don't get a lot of this perspective, especially in like the fighting game community. You don't get a lot of like dev perspective, so definitely gonna be picking your brain on some of those mechanics a little later. But
okay.
let's rewind a bit. I want to talk about, obviously, making a fighting game is just a large endeavor, right? There's a lot that goes into that. So let's rewind and start from the beginning. What exactly inspired you to make Five Force Fighters?
It's kind of complicated if I really try to break it down. I mean, I've wanted to make video games since I was a little kid. My brother was developing like a little skeleton game. It was like a 3D RPG game. And I was like, oh, I want to do this. But eventually that type of passion sizzles when you're a kid and you start going to middle school and high school and all this other stuff. I went to college, I think around 19. I was really down in the dumps. I was going through a lot with family, going through a breakup, going to school for full time, working full time.
Yeah.
And it was just like really, you're just going through life at that point.
Life.
Yeah, life gets you. So I just started looking at all the stuff that I felt passionate about. And the idea of making a game was the first thing that I wanted to do. I'm more of an adventure game, RPG type guy. And I was like, okay, we can make a fighting game first because I thought it was going to be the easiest type of game you can make. But fighting games are not. They're so specific when it comes to frame data, hitboxes, hit reactions, and things like that. But back to, I'm going off track. But the inspiration kind of just came from being, sad, feeling like I wasn't good enough, feeling like I wasn't reaching my full potential of what I really wanted to do in life. I was doing accounting at school, but I wasn't passionate about that. It was just like, I just want to make money. That's what I was thinking when I was going to school. It's all about making money. But yeah, I got down to the nitty gritty. My little brother was in his little book, his sketchbook. He was 14 at the time, and he's sketching this character because we were playing like Xenoverse at the time. He's sketching his Xenoverse character, and I was like, yo, bro, that looks dope. You want to make a game? And he's like, yeah. Literally, he was just like, yeah. My little brother, D, like, he's so nonchalant. He does not care. He's just like, yeah. He'll ride with. He's a goat. He can really do anything. So he does all the animations for the game and like a lot of the art. And so yeah, that's how we got started. It was literally just humble beginnings. We were just trying to figure things out. But going back to just like the inspiration, it was just a bunch of random stuff. We were like, okay, I was like, I don't want this to be like Rivals of Aether, but I want elements in the game. I want these characters to be using, elemental powers. But Rivals of Aether just came out at the time, I think, around like 4 years ago, maybe further along.
A little bit.
And we just did it. We ran with it, and we were just pulling out characters. We were like, we definitely want characters that will represent us, like Black characters. We want to also bring in characters that aren't really represented, like Filipino characters. there was a lot of we were just trying to make sure that we had a diverse cast and that we were also taking into account, respecting cultures and also just having fun with it.
Well said. That's a lot to unpack. And first of all, I just want to say your brother is a goat for just signing up and being like, yeah, let's do it.
I know he's a goat.
That is the most like teenage, like 14-year-old response. Like, yeah, well, why not? Like,
why not?
Let's just dive in.
Crazy. The trust that he put into me. Same with my friend Bird Boy. I can't say his real name. He doesn't want his alias to be dropped. But Bird Boy, he went to high school with me, and he started making the music, but now he's doing the writing for the game for our story mode section. And yeah, they just trusted me. I told them one day, I was like, if you guys put your full trust in me, just let me run this. I think we'll make an impact. And they're just like, okay, let's do it. So it's been a journey. So.
Well, it sounds like you have a really, really, really tight-knit pack there. That's super cool to hear. Speaking of the pack, yeah. Kaizen Creed, that is the name of the team, correct?
Yes, sir.
That name, where does that come from? Because it sounds cool.
Okay.
It sounds amazing. Like Kaizen Creed, that sounds like a character in the game, honestly, right? So
Kaizen Creed came from the idea. It was actually, I got it from my accounting class. We were watching a video on car development. They're developing cars, and they have this philosophy of Kaizen, which is this idea of always improving and making efficient choices when you're producing something. And so Kaizen is that idea of just, becoming better and be more efficient at what you do. And that's what I wanted to embody with the team. And then the creed is like, a creed is just like that promise, that thing you live by. So it's just combining the two. Like, we're living by this philosophy. We're going to be developing games as this philosophy. We're going to create, comic books, TV shows, if we get to that point, with this philosophy in mind. And so that's what Kaizen Creed was all about.
Wow, you're blowing me away with these stories. There's so much there. Like, it's funny, like, to be nerdy for a second. I'm surprised I haven't heard that term Kaizen, especially in like sort of the fighting game community, because you would expect a results-based, hey, I want to improve and get better, would throw that around. I might have to throw that around some more, because I'm sure that'll definitely get some traction.
Yeah.
So rewinding a bit back to the character designs and whatnot, I noticed that you said a lot about representation. Mm-hmm. When you are designing a character for a fighting game, 5 force fighters, right? Is it difficult? Like, where do we start?
Where do we start? Mm-hmm. Okay. If we're going to be honest, I'm an amateur video game developer, just hopped into it. So what we did was we were just like, hey, what looks cool? What's cool? Let's make the character cool. Yeah. That's what we thought. It wasn't, I remember when I first started tweeting on Twitter about the game, and people were like, yo, are these attacks based off of jujitsu or da-da-da-da-da? And I was like, no. Like, these moves are just our imagination of what we thought was cool. So Coco, for example, fast paced, he uses lightning. Lightning's fast. Wanted him to throw like quick rapid punches, things like that, quick movements. And then we also had this idea that Pebbles, his half brother, would do moves the opposite of him. So he's like flowy with his moves. But whenever Coco would throw a kick with the same input, Pebbles would throw a punch. So that's what we were just always having in mind, was just like kind of having these little, I don't know if you could call them Easter eggs, but just ideas that made our characters feel fun and cool. And that was really just it. There wasn't really any technical thinking to it, unfortunately. More so now there is. When you first start, it's not like that.
I think the rule of cool is super understated. Like, when it comes to fighting games, listen, 90% of people that are gonna pick up and play something are immediately gonna look at the screen and gonna be like, what looks cool? Like,
yeah,
I think using that as a North Star, at least initially, is perfectly fine. If not, you're getting a thumbs up from me, because that's definitely something that's important, sort of the art style, the rule of cool thing. So
if I can go back into it, if you know the developer Arcus Chroma GX, me and him we talk here and there. We're cool. So I remember we got on our first call, and we were just talking about each other's games, and he was just like, he said something along the lines of, when people that play fighting games, like professionals play fighting games, they're always thinking about the frame data exactly, the technicality before they think about what's cool, and then that's usually why their games aren't really as fun, because they really want it to be like as tight as possible so they can pull off these crazy inputs, things like that. But people who are like amateurs or love fighting games for what they are, kind of make more fun fighting games in a sense. I remember him saying that. I was just like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm not the best fighting game player, but I can get down, and I like to have fun. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting that I've seen that a lot, and especially in the Japanese scene. They're all about efficiency. It's always like, whenever, especially with the Street Fighter 6 stuff that is like coming out, whenever I see, a Japanese pro player reacting to it, it's never like, yo, Guile looks crazy. It's like, that looks like 17 frames. I wonder what, like just analyzing it and breaking it down. Naturally, I guess you sort of have to get there at some point, right? Because those frame data and stuff like that is, I guess, sort of the building blocks of fighting games. It's how they operate. And I guess that sort of leads into my next question about sort of like balance. Has your perspective of game balance as a whole kind of shifted just from a player now that you're sort of a developer and player?
I think you have to be a bit more intentional when you're developing the game,
Yeah.
I think you can choose favorites sometimes. Like, my favorite character in our game is Pebbles, right? But my little brother has his favorites too. He likes Pebbles a lot, but we always have to go back and forth about, no, you can't keep this, keep that. So you have to be more intentional. You got to keep your biases aside, and you have to make the game as balanced as possible. I remember when we were developing Poem, she's like the big earth wielding girl, and she was broken. She was just broken at the start. And we were testing her out, and we were like, yeah, we got to remove this, we got to remove that, we got to make this slower, all this other stuff, because balancing the game is super important for people to want to even continue to play it. If you're just getting bodied by a computer or a CPU or another player because their character is just OP and you have no options to defend against what they're throwing out, you're not having fun. At the end of the day, it's about having fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's definitely changed how I see stuff. But at the same time, I think anybody can relate to that. That balancing is just like probably the peak of, how fun a game is going to be.
It's something that you absolutely want to achieve. Naturally, it's so hard to do. And you even mentioned it with your character that you had to almost reverse engineer it. You're like, wow, we made a broken character. We got to like see what makes her tick and then fix some things. And that's obviously that's a very important and super reassuring to hear. Very reassuring to hear. I actually wondered, what are your thoughts about like top tiers in fighting games? Do you feel like maybe over-representation of a particular character kind of ruins the vibe of the game? Are you just sort of like waiting for like 5-force fighters to like here's the most efficient thing? And sort of, how do you approach balancing that in particular? What are your like attitudes?
Well, the thing about 5-force fighters in general is that it has, unlike a lot of games, it has more universal mechanics than it has character-specific mechanics. So, in that point, like with that point continued, it's more about, is the universal system breaking this character or making them more efficient than another? And I don't think that's really the case with our game, because everything's kind of, it's like a rock, paper, scissors, but with a lot of different options. So it's hard to kind of even tell sometimes when you're testing out your own game. It's like when you let other people have it and they actually understand what's going on under the hood and what kind of secret mechanics you've put in place, and they're like, oh shoot, I can do this, but they can do that to counter what I'm doing. Is like all those options kind of break things down, and the speed of the game also plays a factor into that. It's just how fast can you react to what your opponent's doing. But yeah, I think that's how I feel about it. It's really, top tiers are inevitable, but there are ways to get around them. You see it all the time. I mean, I watch Smash videos.
Yeah.
Like top teams get beat
Hey, there's an answer.
because the players.
Sometimes that's all you need. You just need to find that answer, right? That's fighting games, right?
It's fighting games.
Did you have any sort of like original concepts that you maybe had to like revisit or sort of like dial back on while developing?
Yeah. I mean, I might want to use some of these ideas later, so I don't know if I want to throw them all out there. But there's I remember the OG idea for Fire Force Fighters was to be kind of like a platform fighter with a huge foundation based off of cooperating with your partner. So say you got knocked off the stage, you could use your partner to throw you back on. A lot of team play was the plan for Fire Force Fighters originally, and I was like, okay, that's cool. I want to have a magic system in there. All these buff debuff ideas because I am a huge RPG fan. So I was thinking about all these different things, and then it was also largely inspired by Smash, right? So I had this idea for charging your moves, and they're getting stronger. But I was just like, let's just make it traditional. But I kept the idea of using charges in the game, but in a different way than Smash does it. So you can hold on, but because Smash was based off of, launching your opponent off the screen and them exploding in this huge, magnificent, confetti thing, we couldn't do that with a traditional. So it was more of the attack can do more damage, and it has different properties, so you can pull off a different type of combo based off of how much you charge this move. Some of the stuff was lost. Obviously, it's not a platform fighter, but also some of the stuff was translated or transposed into new ideas that makes our game kind of brand new and unique. I can honestly say that it doesn't play like another fighter.
Yeah, I was just mentioned sort of the charge moves. I want to mention sort of your control system. It's very cool. I didn't get my to play the game just yet. However, I will say, just looking at the control scheme, there's no tap jump. There's a button, and you have your charges and sort of like these more directional inputs. If I'm not mistaken, right? So I'm assuming those were sort of like the inspired parts of like Smash Brothers and like maybe Rivals as well.
Yeah, it definitely was. Because I was playing Smash a lot when I was doing this, making the game originally, and I was playing this game called Hyper Dragon Ball Z, a Mugen game. The controls, the inputs were kind of based off of Smash Bros. I wanted the quickest way you can pull off, combos just by pressing directions. But we use, instead of pressing up to jump, you use a button because you have a directional input to attack with an up direction. So I was just like, okay, we'll just make it a button. There was a little bit of some people don't like it. They didn't really, you can't, because it's hard to change, how people feel about traditional fighters. So, I might have to go back and make an option. Like I had a controller config and just make an option for, jumping with the up direction. And then they can mess around with whatever they want to do. If it doesn't work out for them, they can't use another attack. That's on them. I'm just joking. But the directions and the inputs were a design choice, fully based off of how we wanted the game to work.
Wow. Yeah. So, very, very intentional. When it comes to people, being attached to old things, even some of the older franchises, and I'm sure you could pick up on what I'm talking about, are starting to sort of like give you options. So it's sort of refreshing. I'm sure people are going to come to it. First of all, if you want to play a particular game, go play that game. This is Fire Force Fighters.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
That's how I see it. A lot of people want you to change for them, but then you have to realize if they want that type of game, they could have just played it. I think there was a huge thing about Guilty Gear. They're like, this doesn't play like Guilty Gear. I forget. There's a lot of Guilty Gears, but they were saying they didn't play like a specific Guilty Gear game, and I was just like, you could just play that one if you like it so much. This game, the new Guilty Gear is for, the new Guilty Gear. Don't try to ruin their vibe.
I feel that so hard. And to mention that, I feel like there's sort of an important thing to note here is that, I appreciate you sort of just explaining the intention. That's something that I don't really see a lot of devs doing currently at the moment. Hopefully that changes in the future, right? But just saying that, hey, the game is going to play this way, or hey, this is our game. And as long as you have those intentions clear and you're just like telling the audience that saying, hey, Five Horse Fighters is going to play this way and it's going to value these things, then it's sort of like ridiculous if people get like upset at the notion, because they already know what they signed up for, right? Yeah, it's tough because, sometimes, and it's really complicated. You have like marketing and stuff like that you have to work out. But a lot of these fighting games, it feels as if you have to pay $60 to try it.
No, that's crazy. The cool thing about indie games is, I mean, it's a cool thing, but also the sad thing about indie games is that you have to price your stuff lower because you don't have that name brand identity that other games do, or that AAA sponsorship that other games do. But with that comes experimentation, creativity, freedom of choice of what you really want to put out there, with nobody like over your back saying, no, that's a bad idea, do it this way because it's worked before. You get to experiment so much that you can actually, create something that nobody's seen before or even thought of. So that's what's wild about it.
I mean, just the notion of that alone is super. It's got me excited for the future. There's waves of indie fighting games are coming out, and I'm just excited, man. I really am.
There are a lot of them.
There's a lot of things that are slowly starting to become standard now. I guess the biggest example you've seen is probably rollback netcode. I guess, well, first of all, does Five Horse Fighters have rollback netcode at all? Yeah,
so Five Horse Fighters is definitely being developed with rollback netcode in mind. The crazy thing was, like, when we were originally making it, obviously was not, because back 4 years ago, it wasn't really a huge thing. And kids like me and my brother, 14, 19, we were just like, okay, let's just run with it. Let's just start developing a game. So initially it wasn't. So after the Kickstarter, we spent some time going back and redeveloping. I spent a lot of time off Twitter and social media, just trying to figure out stuff from the ground up to kind of get the game rolling. So yeah, it wasn't developed with, originally wasn't developed with rollback in mind, because it wasn't, something we were, aware of. I learned about it a lot through, Twitter, seeing a lot of players getting on the heads of developers, like a lot of, I think, Arc Systems games, and be like, yo, you guys need to add rollback, and they were doing it for some of their games and things like that. And I was like, oh shoot, it's huge.
So, rollback netcode being an industry standard, is there anything else that you would like to see fighting game developers implement later on, or I guess now, in their games?
Yeah, I think a cool thing to implement into your, like, a fighting game in general would be like a strong story mode or a strong single player mode. I think a lot of fighting games lack that. I don't know how you can, because we all know that most people pick up fighting games for that, competitive action against somebody online or against their friend in the living room. But I think if you're able to capture your character's identity in a story and make people actually fall in love with what you're trying to tell and present, that can be a whole different, idea and feeling around your IP and your characters. So I think that'd be huge if a lot of people were able to try to capture that feeling that a lot of games have for their, like, RPGs and things like that.
1000%. We want to care about these characters. I want to see what is Coco and Pebbles' favorite food, or what are their dislikes and likes, stuff like that. It means a lot.
Yeah.
It does.
Coco likes American football. Pebbles likes soccer. It's just all, there's things like that.
Yeah, they're really true opposites, aren't they? Both like football, just in different regions.
But who likes manga? Coco likes manga, Pebble likes anime. These guys are different.
Polar yin and yang at that point, right? Just
all the same.
Yeah. That's super cool. So yeah, I mean, strong story elements are just one of those things that you can't really, I guess you could go wrong with it, but it's usually never a bad
Mhm.
thing, right?
Yeah. It's really cool seeing what Street Fighter is doing. I mean, we haven't really seen a lot of it, but what they're doing with their single player looks pretty unique. Is it actually? I don't know for sure if it's a created character type of situation, but it's looking like they're taking attention to their single player, and that's cool to see. And I don't think that's taken away from the overall game itself. I think a lot of people are hyped from what they're seeing, and so am I. And I mean, I just take a lot of inspiration from that and being like, okay, I want to do the same thing. I mean, I've had plans to, because I want people to be invested in what I'm making, not just because the game looks fun or the game. I mean, yeah, okay, yeah, I want them to have, be like, yeah, the game looks fun, but I want them to be like, yeah, this game and their characters are really dope and they have awesome stories. I want to know more. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, that's probably the RPG player inside of you, right? You want to
Probably.
you want to have an
Hmm.
adventure with these characters, and hey, sign me up. I'm down.
I got you.
I wanna definitely have an adventure with those characters. Is there any like other new things that you'd like to see developers implement in fighting games that maybe aren't standard now?
A free to play, giving people a lot of like a chance to play with a lot of characters. I think that'd be really cool. I do like that idea. I know that's going to be maybe probably detrimental to indie games, if indie fighters, because if we're not free to play, then like we can't make money off of our game. But for big companies, I think that idea of being able to play with the full Street Fighter roster, and the only thing you have to do is maybe buy some costumes or something like that, that's probably fine. But I like the idea of giving kids who don't couldn't buy the DLC from Smash Wii U, the chance to just play all those characters. That's what I think could be really dope.
Yeah, I want to mention multiverse. Multiverses looks like it's almost doing something, even with like a
Yeah.
battle pass, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
you look at games like Fortnite and Apex, and it looks like they have it figured out. So hopefully we can take a page from that book and maybe develop something new, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
I don't know.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
oh yeah, it's all yours.
I was just gonna say, I don't know any other ideas I could come up off the spot that would, change how fighting games kind of, involve the scene. But I think maybe something that could be really dope is, developers coming together in a sense and being like, yo, we want this place. And I mean, Evo was created by the Cannons, right? But it'd be cool if there was like a spot where like Capcom is like, yo, this is our spot, and we have tournaments for Capcom fighting games, or like actually creating like a community base, not just with the design of the game, but like around the people. I think that would actually be really dope. So if they thought about where can we gather all these people who enjoy our games and our IPs in one spot, and give them an experience that they've never really gotten before.
Wow, yeah, well said. That is hopefully that's something, and maybe you're seeing like hints or like touches here or there when it comes to you mentioned Capcom with the CUT events and stuff like that, lifting up specific community members. Hopefully the world gets back together soon. All the stuff that's happening, and we can play some fighting games. Because like that sounds like a great idea. Love, where exactly can we find you and information about what you're doing, and also with Five Force Fighters?
Well, you can find me, well, not personally, but you can find Kaizen Creed at Kaizen Creed. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I love TikTok. Get on there. Show some love. But yeah, you can find me on all those social media platforms. Give me a follow, give me a like, give me a retweet. Share the work and spread the love of Five Force Fighters, because it's going to be a fun fighting game.